Good morning, and thank you for joining the Holiday Gifting Review, Decoding Shopper Plans Amid Increasing Uncertainty, with John Gretsch, Chief Commercial Officer of GiftNow. As a reminder, if you have any questions, to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now, here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Hello, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So as we're approaching, or technically in the holiday season, depending on how you define it these days, does it start October 1? Does it start November 1? But we're in either the depths of it or in the warm-up piece of it. Gift cards we're seeing are becoming an increased piece of the consumer's thought process around the gift experience. And so they're actually starting to kind of build this into their gifting plan. And John and I were talking about, right? It's not like December 23rd and you're trying to figure out what to get somebody. There's a real kind of change in how consumers are approaching this. And so we want to kind of dive into this and some of the challenges we're seeing in the macro environment and how all that's coming together. And so I always like these kind of slides where we see kind of many different points of interest and information. The interesting thing about what we're seeing is consumers are, right, there are a lot of questions around what are things going to cost, what's going to happen to, kind of with wages, are they going to keep pace with inflation? And so we're seeing kind of a real change in terms of how inflation is kind of playing a part of this holiday season. And so, John, as you look at this and you kind of look at number 5, and gift cards have been kind of a top category, but now I think they're part of the planning of one's gifting. How do you reconcile that with all the macro, if you will, noise that you're seeing?
That's a good one, and
the
a big one with a couple of layers to it. I think one of the operative words that you said was planning, right? And so certainly we're seeing a more deliberate ask for them, and that's coming through in the survey data that consumers gave us in the report. But we're also seeing that translate to merchants thinking maybe a little bit differently about how they're marketing and merchandising gift cards. It's the number one item people are seeking as a gift, and that kind of changes things a little bit. If you're someone who sells shoes, you want that item to be the number one seller you're planning for, but it might turn out that a gift card is actually what consumers are seeking. And so I think we're going to see that play out in the marketing and on-site path to purchase sort of messaging in retail, and we'll probably start to see a little bit more prominence of featuring that item on their site as a piece of merchandise, or as how a piece of merchandise was presented in the past. And so, and gift cards are interesting just because of the nature of they're always in stock. There's no sort of shipping cost to them unless it's a piece of plastic, right? If it's a digital, there's no cost, there's no taxes, so it's definitely an interesting way to think about how to merchandise an item on the site.
I mean, I feel, and some of our research indicates, right, that the consumer, right, they have a budget and they're kind of sticking to it. And one of the reasons that we believe we've seen holiday move earlier is that, they can, start to do a better job of planning, but also if there's kind of a little bit left in December, right, they can either treat themselves or do something more for somebody they care about. But the nice thing with the gift card, as you alluded to, right, is like the kind of the price is the price. And it really is helping with budgeting, right, in a season where, we haven't heard about these challenges around budgeting in many years. And so I think that that's what has become more interesting. And I just feel like this whole idea that, like, at the beginning of the season, as people are starting to plan, it's not just like gift with purchase anymore. It's actually like it's a category. Yep. And I do feel like there's almost been this pivot point, even just between, holiday 21 and 22. What do you think is happening inside of the consumer's mind, and also maybe on the gift recipient's side?
Well, on the consumer side, the purchase side, again, going back to kind of the planning and it becoming part of the purchase plan versus the ripcord at the end when I wasn't sure what to do or I was too late. And so that changes things a little bit. I think some of the macroeconomic trends we're seeing with inflation and budget conscious shopping front and center for consumers. They are thinking about how do they contain their shopping. We've seen through our product gifting service that if people intend to spend 100, they might spend 150 or 125 on a product because they think it's that much better from what they originally thought they were going to get, right? And so they find themselves, it's kind of the scope creep, right, in purchasing, and they find themselves spending a little bit more on products where, you know, a gift card at $100 is always a gift. It's $100, and so you're limiting that scope creep as a consumer. On the recipient side, you know, we know from just the early studies at the dawn of this business that consumers actually find more thrill in products over gift cards, but there's more flexibility in gift cards. And so there's this sort of yin yang that I think recipients are toying with around the emotional component of gifting, because this isn't commerce really, right? It's me giving you something to celebrate an event or a moment. And so there's other dimensions to my consideration than just the price and how I get it to you. And so that stuff I think is coming through a little bit more this year than maybe in the past also.
It's really interesting. I know on the next slide we kind of detail some of the challenges, and certainly there's a lot of noise right now in the media around inflation, you know, certainly, you know, kind of energy prices and whatnot on a global basis, you know, and it's fascinating, right? You look at like even like the different categories of food, right? And the levels of inflation that we're seeing and kind of just how that's really kind of impacting folks. You know, do you think that, you know, is there a specific category? Is it kind of on the restaurant side, entertainment, right? Where are you seeing some of the greatest changes in, you know, kind of gift card consumption, or where do you think they will be kind of, you know, tete-a-tete or head-to-head with some of what we're seeing on the inflation front?
So I like to watch, and I mentioned this in another conversation, kind of restaurants and what they're doing in gift card, especially because they don't have the same catalog environment that a retailer would. And so they're really focused on how to make consumer behavior change around the way that they present, they message, and they even promote their gift card itself. And so things like buy one, get one, you know, buy 100, get 20, you know, I'm starting to see these emails come into my inbox from some of the larger restaurant groups that I'll patronize throughout the year. And that, I think, gives you the earliness of the promotion, and I think gives you the indication of what people are beginning to think about how to get into holiday and start winning around the promotional. And, you know, the other side of it is the value creation. It's not always about the discount. There's other ways to create value, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point later. But I think that's another dimension to it all, especially when it comes to experiences. And so up on that list of things people want to get or to give, experience has certainly crept up over the last couple of years. And I think that'll play an interesting role in where the budget that we're going to talk about gets allocated throughout the season.
So that's a good point. And then do you find that, you know, is there either a type of retailer or a type of consumer who is looking to kind of capitalize on this more?
I think the direct-to-consumer brands have a better way of saying you're giving my brand than a mass merchant necessarily. Right? Mass merchants give you ultimate depth or breadth and flexibility in what you purchase. But the brand itself, by giving the brand in the form of a gift card, it's a different way to gift. It's a different type of gift. And so, you know, when you start to unpack the purpose behind the gift card or the purpose behind the decision of the gift card, then that starts to reveal some of these things. So if I'm really looking for a super wide, I want you to be able to get anything from fuel to, you know, a cup of coffee to a product. You know, there's certainly great open loop credit card or gift cards that you can buy to give somebody that ultimate flexibility. But as you get further and further away from the brand, they actually get less and less exciting to get. From the emotional component of gifting, right? It's less and less specific to you. It's less and less personal. When I give you the brand of the shoes I know you love, because I've seen you wear 5 different versions of that brand, that speaks to the connection that I have with, honoring the things that I know you care about. And so there's that continuum that we need to keep in mind as well when it comes to how to talk to consumers.
That makes a ton of sense. And then, as we kind of look at the next slide and, think about how, kind of price plays into everything, this idea around kind of, gift shoppers kind of looking at product prices either being very influential or extremely influential, and this idea around kind of like discounts and deals, and this whole idea around kind of value-seeking behavior, as we start to think about how, right, are there consumers who you believe have not necessarily given gift cards as a gift in the past who will this holiday season based on a lot of the macro headwinds we're seeing? Or do you think that we'll see, that consumer who's given a gift card in the past doing that across a wider kind of swath?
I think that there are those people who will never buy a gift card. And we know that through studying people, right? And there are people who will actually always buy a gift card. It's as usual, it's the folks in the middle and which way they're going to go this particular season. And so that meaty middle, which is not an insignificant, percentage of total shoppers, I think are using all of the things that we're uncovering in the data that we went out and researched, and that's significantly influencing how they're thinking about their buying decisions this year. Budget, yes, budget might get a little bigger, but it's still front and center. How is inflation playing a role in terms of my sensitivity to spend, right? So just because I have $800 to spend for holiday, I'm making it up, doesn't mean that I want to spend all of it. And that budget might have gotten a little bigger than last year, but because of, I think, what's going on right now, everyone is paying a lot more attention to each dollar that they spend and making sure they're extracting the most value out of it. And so, like we said, promotions, I think will be important. And there's a lot of ways I think you can get after it this year that may not necessarily lead to just, crossing off the price and dropping it on the item itself.
Is there anything here as you look at kind of what's influencing the consumer this holiday season? Is there anything here that is a surprise to you?
Not really, honestly. I maybe kind of the order, maybe, product price, for example. I feel like I don't know how that really creeps up to the top. I'm not going to lie, right? Mm-hmm. It's, you kind of know what you're going to buy, or what you want to buy. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. If you can, and you can save money, then you've got a couple extra dollars left over. So, I don't know how that, for example, influences more than something like deals and discounts, which are really designed to motivate action now. So no, I'm not entirely surprised by a lot of what we're seeing here in this data.
To I think maybe connect some dots, we're seeing an unprecedented interest in refurbed consumer electronics. And so this idea around price, these are things that I would not have thought would necessarily be at the top of the list. And so as we maybe look at this in a different way, and so there you have a price, and then you may have a discount off of that, but you're at the beginning starting with a price that's 30 to 50% less than if it was kind of bought new. And so I do think that maybe these are things we just haven't thought of before that are changing based on the macro. But that actually, it's funny. I'm glad you said that, because I don't know if I thought about it that way. I'll tell you what was surprising to me on this was, we hear so much about sustainability, but when you and consumers don't want to spend more, we understand that. But the fact that kind of sustainability initiatives are as low as they are on the list, and I do think consumers are very aware and do more research. But that to me was, as I looked through this, the one that I found a bit surprising.
Yeah, I think that there's, when you ask people to put their money where their mouth is around things like this, it might actually change what shows up in a report. What I'm willing to say versus what I'm willing to do may not be the same thing. And it doesn't mean I believe less in the mission. It just means I'm, maybe not really ready to place the bet alongside of others. I will say it's on the list, right?
True.
So that's not true. A couple of years ago, it wasn't even showing up, and so I think there's good news in that, right?
True.
But to your point, and also how do you really measure that? So I think that there's some. I think this is actually a space or a category or a topic that's going to get more and more momentum, and will become a more endemic part of shopping. But we're kind of not quite there yet in terms of how their efforts are being revealed and driving a certain type of response from their shoppers.
No, that's a really, I think the fact that it hasn't been on the list and now we're seeing it, I mean, you're definitely seeing, and I think consumers are doing more research, which is once again why I think gift cards are a very interesting kind of solution. As we kind of look to the next slide and we talk about this, thought process around shopping windows, what we're seeing in terms of time, the fact that we're seeing kind of holiday even pulled into September. I mean, this is like a real, to me, this is kind of a real change in some ways. What do you make of this? What is a surprise to you? And how do you think this continues to evolve over time? Or do you think this is kind of, once and done?
I don't know if it's once and done. I think a lot of what happens is actually driven by the influence of the marketing and the communications and so on. And so I think the halo of last year's supply chain crisis that we all experienced to some degree, but heard about in a very, very big and loud way, right, may have contributed to beginning the season earlier. Potentially the need to kind of stretch out the budgeting over a longer period of time than last year might be playing into that as well. What I think is interesting is kind of the bookended. If you look at the right side, they're actually planning on stopping later as well. And in terms of the upward up and to the right that we're seeing there on the red line, and so that. I think that's actually an interesting trend. They're starting earlier and they're actually ending a little bit earlier also, or ending a little bit later. Also.
It's just like longer. I mean, I actually wonder if it goes back to the idea around kind of price and then like deals and discounts where, they're really looking at price in a different way. And because they're doing more research, right, they really know the price of items. And, I personally believe that October would be a very interesting month because we're seeing a lot of true experimentation, right? Because how do we, right, if we're in an over inventoried situation, how do we maximize our margins, our ROI? And I have said, right, there are things that we're going to truly just see hit once. And, if it works, it's great. We'll continue to see it. If not, right, they'll move on. But I do think this is a year where we're seeing a lot more experimentation. And I think that is, really kind of quite interesting in how the consumer is approaching this. And then, as we think about it from a gift recipient perspective as well, right? Like when do we give people our lists, right? Do we need to get those kind of put together early, right? I just think it really starts to kind of change. And I think that one of the things that's also very interesting this holiday season, right, is because we had inventory that had been in factories, had been in containers, and kind of every which way till Sunday is kind of coming through all at the same time. We are in a bit of a seasonless holiday season, right? We have spring, summer, fall, and winter, all in some cases in like physical stores. And that I think is also, right, we're seeing unprecedented, right? We're up right now versus 2019 on in-store traffic. So the consumer is also changing, right? There's a lot of behaviors that are changing all at once.
There are. And I one of these slides will speak to the increase yet another year, which, I don't think anyone on this call would be surprised. Another increase in total spend online versus store this year, increasing yet again. And so to your point, for sure, the influence of digital is going to be much broader than even the point of purchase because of the research. This elongated sort of season, I think, I think you're going to see people kind of saying, anchoring in on what it is they want to get, and then they're going to be a little bit more patient about sitting it out and waiting for that right deal to come along. And so that might be contributing to the trend of beginning it sooner.
Yeah, just on a completely separate note, but related, right? We're finally seeing a bit of an uptick in live streaming. Much of that is done from stores, and the way that a lot of sales associates are rewarded is through kind of gift cards. Do you think that, once again, as a medium, right? Because we're now seeing, I think, not only sales associates who are ultimately, right, our window into the soul of many of these retailers, they're valuing those in a different way. Do you think that when they're communicating to consumers, is that changing anything? Because, like I said, there's something you and I've talked about it, but there's like a bigger change. And I've been looking at kind of, you try to connect the dots or look at the breadcrumbs or whatever it might be, look in your tea. But there's something more happening here. And I'm trying to figure out what is the root of it.
I wish I had an answer. I think that some of it has to do with kind of the shock that we got through COVID and people separation and isolation, and what that did to drive energy into ways to meaningfully connect with people. A lot of this stuff, right? A lot of screens between people that we didn't have to really think about in the past. And so I think it created more value in the relationships that people are willing to celebrate on a more regular basis. And that's not just within consumer to consumer, but also business to business and business to consumer, business to employee. We saw obviously a significant uptick in the corporate business as a result of employee engagement type of programs, and not just at holiday, right? This was sort of all throughout the year. People were wanting to find ways to connect with their employees and celebrate wins or just acknowledge the great work they've been doing and the commitment they had to the business through the tough times. And so I think gifting kind of has been lifted as it pertains to a payment device. Underneath all of it is just really stored value. And I think there's a lot more utility in that mechanism in retail than is being unlocked right now. And these types of trends, I think, are setting the foundation for kind of what's next. And so I'm pretty excited about what will change over the next 18 to 24 months as we start to see this evolve into something more than just, currency on a piece of plastic.
Can I ask you along those lines, something I've actually been thinking about quite a bit is, as we're moving, the second quarter, we saw a real change in terms of this like cookie apocalypse. And retailers are focusing more and more on loyalty, right, to build those communities, gateways, relationships with consumers. I've always felt that stored value really augments that relationship in a completely, I would say, cataclysmic way. How do you see this, right? I think we're at the infancy in some of this, but the explosive growth seems to be ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it in other fintech categories too. It's not really just gift card, right? But just think about how much the payment space has evolved in the last 5 years, even, and consumers' access to different vehicles for making payments, and how that folds into the overall path of purchase that retail puts up in front of their shoppers. And so I think that we're in this kind of renaissance period to some extent around a number of these things. We saw it, over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of how people are accessing credit, for example. We're seeing that evolution in stored value, and not just thinking about it in a very narrow lens of, I can only put money here. Yes, money is underneath it all, but that's actually value. So then how do I interpret that value? How do I place that value back out into the consumer world? And so I'm excited for it. Obviously, we've been innovating in the stored value space for 7 or 8 years with product gifting as a new way to think about accessing the flexibility inherent in stored value. And we've seen, great wins in that category in partnership with our retailers and brands that leverage that capability.
That's really interesting. And I think that, in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next slide. But I do feel like, as we look at, kind of this move around how much consumers plan to spend, is this I think has been a bit contrary to what many would have expected. How is this kind of consistent with what you've seen?
Well, for sure, we've seen a general uptick. I think it speaks a little bit to what we talked about earlier around people wanting to place more expressed value on their relationships, especially around such a family-oriented occasion that we see in December holidays. And so, yes, despite inflation, it's wonderful to hear that people are looking to spend more. And by the way, what I don't know, and I'm curious, right, does that mean that John is getting bigger and better gifts this year? Or does that mean that more people are getting gifts this year? And I think that would be an interesting data point to uncover, right? Everyone's got their little list of, and then they got the folks that they need to get the candle for, the bottle of wine. And so, but did that tail get longer, or is, Billy getting a $300 bike instead of a $200 bike he would have gotten last year? I'm not sure.
I mean, logic would tell me that as we're, kind of reconnecting with more people, right, there's some of it is just, right, the recency effect, right? I saw this person, oh my goodness, right? Like that type of, and mm-hmm. that your list kind of grows. And I think going back to the fact that we have more alternatives almost in terms of how we kind of, give gifts. And like I said, I think that they're just based on kind of consumer psychology. And, it's interesting in terms of like the poll as we're looking at the results, right? I mean, many, it's fascinating that so many folks started, right, promotions in September, right? Things mm-hmm. that were like unheard of in the past. And then I think that, everyone seems to think for the most part, that there will be, the yeses way outweigh the no's in terms of, kind of greater gift card sales, which I also think, right, there's a kind of overall assumption here in terms of just some of the changes around kind of consumer behavior. And, I think it's interesting on the inflation question, everyone thinks there will be kind of some impact, but it's hard right now to weigh it, especially I think that, the sequential, right, like the month on month change, I think has kind of changed a little bit in terms of what we would have expected. And so I do think that's interesting. And I think it's a lot for, as everyone's trying to make some of these decisions on the fly, right, there is a lot of data that's kind of coming in, all at once. And
I think towards that, Deborah, that there's we have to recognize also that the systematic sort of evolution of the platforms that retailers and merchants are using, and how quickly they can react to certain feedback or trends or data, the insights that they're gathering. The planning cycles used to be a heck of a lot longer from a marketing and merchandising perspective. And so I'm not going to say real time, because anytime there's a human, it can't be, right? But the ability to move from observation to action has really, really changed, I think, in the last half a decade. And now we're starting to see retail really kind of lean into it and start to take advantage of all the capabilities they have. And so in the past, where we could have said, tell me about your plans, and you get a pretty well prescribed playbook that wasn't going to deviate all that much because it was really hard to do that midstream. That's not true anymore. And so I think if we track what people said they were going to do versus what they're actually doing, we're going to see that gap widen and widen as every year goes on, and as systems become more nimble and ability to execute and activate new ideas midstream becomes more of a reality than a fantasy like it was years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to like I do think people are literally like testing in season, which are things that we've never we've never seen before. And that is quite interesting. I mean, and as you look here, I mean, with half of shoppers planning to spend over $500, I mean, those are some, kind of pretty significant, numbers. And it goes back to, I think, there's, we're all, I think, in some ways so excited. First of all, we all understand that, everyone's facing some kind of inflation. Secondly, I do think there is this idea, right? And there's also, I always think in here, there's gifts that we give others, and there's gifts we give to ourselves, right? So that whole idea around selving, right? And so I do think we're all like, we've made it, we've done so well, right? Like, we're here, we're there, we're everywhere. But like, I do think there's also this idea that, right, as we think about how we define gifts, I think that is also kind of changing as well. And to me, this is my, I mean, there's some good slides here, but this is my favorite of all, because this is like, to me, this is a big, this is that inflection point, John. This is where I think stored value, right, is I think we look at alternate kind of payment types and categories. I just think the way that, and going back to this idea around loyalty programs and whatnot, this is a big delta, right? In terms of, I mean, if you look at, there's a 1,300 basis point difference between gift cards and apparel, footwear, and accessories. I mean, that is significant.
It is. And again, I think that we need, and when I say we, I mean the retail community needs to pay attention to this, because this matters in terms of what they're saying, how they're saying it, when they're saying it. It's not necessarily anymore the thing I just end up falling back on, and I got to check the box for something for, Uncle Bob. So that means that customers have to be able to find it easily. It has to be, think about how to promote it. Think about how to put it in front of them at the right time, just like you do anything else. And so there's a slight mismatch between what people intend versus what they want. Want usually wins out. And so that's something interesting to see how that shifts.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions from the audience, so I do want to make sure we address those. One of the kind of, I think it's a great question. I mean, we'll start at the most recent. So John asked us, a different John, do you see digital gifts growing in popularity, kind of digital gift cards, crypto, NFTs, growing in popularity as a common gift in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I would look at, for as it pertains to gift cards, digital is just a format for delivery. I think that there's a lot of choice around that in terms of a preference to deliver versus a piece of plastic. There is something ceremonious about being able to physically hand something to somebody. And when you're in their presence, that would probably be a more personal way of doing it. But there's all the other people that you're not going to see. And so the form factor for how to move it from the brand to the recipient is probably less important than the gift card as an item itself. The NFTs, I think there's a whole nother track and probably a lot of conversation we can have around where those fit into the overall mix of value drivers, as an example, right? I mean, we didn't talk about how that could fit into not being a promotional item, but almost a gift with purchase that is an NFT, for example. But we don't have enough time to go through all of that in this short conversation.
Yeah. Somebody else asked, this was Scott, how are consumers defining good value, and what are the nuances, kind of across multicultural consumers? It's a great question. And maybe a whole webinar to itself, but I at least want to ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, when you say, we don't have a two-way here. I don't know what he means or she means by multicultural customers.
I think just do you define? I mean, it could be right. If we think about it, there is do different, like, for everyone looks at value, I think, a bit differently, right? And so I think that is, I mean, and good value, and and also I think it would depend on the product categories that you're purchasing. So I think it goes back to, like, there is a multi-factor approach here as well. So kind of based on the category you're buying, based on where you live, based on, right, kind of your family size and scope and where they are geographically as well. I mean, it is a multi kind of part question. But maybe when you take a step, John, back and you really look at a lot of the data that you have, are there differences, when you're looking at the demographics, psychographics, there's geographics in there on how people define value or how they just think about shopping in general? Maybe we can just kind of put a more general kind of blanket here.
We see certain trends, and unfortunately, I don't have great data to refer to on the multicultural question specifically, but we certainly see differences in men and women, for example, in terms of their behavior as gift purchasers, and it ranges from the amount of money they're going to spend to when they're going to spend that money, right? Men tend to creep up a lot closer to the day of the event itself than women do. Women tend to plan more in advance. And we see that through the scheduling of whether it be a product gift or a gift card in our platform. Men tend to spend more, women tend to spend a little less. They buy more of them, and they're doing that generally more in advance of the event. Men tend to stall and procrastinate. They will also, all merchants out there selling to men this holiday. So if you're a women's category, you might have a lot of male shoppers this season. They're willing to pay more every day that they get closer to the event. There's this sort of guilt tax that we see weigh in on that last minute. Their wallets open more to buy things. And so these are trends that are probably worthwhile looking at. On the recipient end, oddly, men are actually more picky than women. And we know that because within our product gifting platform, we know that we know who exchanges or changes. So if I bought a red jacket for somebody, they have the chance to make that black before it ships, for example. Men tend to do that more often than women. And so women are less picky, men are more picky, it turns out, which was a little bit of a surprise to me the first time that I saw that data. But yeah, we don't get down to the sort of culture level. So I can't speak to that, but I can tell you just from the observations of other, data dimensions that I'm sure there's a lot to learn there.
A few of you asked us to put this slide back up, so I'll leave it up for a second just to kind of, there's a lot to digest here, and we'll have the slides available afterwards and can send them out as well. Another question here is, as we kind of, as we move through the holiday season, do you start to see, this is a question from Michelle, where do you start to see kind of bigger ticket sales happening? And, is that earlier? Would you expect it to be October, November, December? When do you expect that to happen? And what are some of the factors that contribute to how consumers think about those things? And do you see folks also, in some cases asking for gift cards? And I'm now kind of summarizing the question, ask for gift cards to maybe make some of those big ticket purchases after the holiday season?
There's so many questions in that question.
That's a good one.
I'm trying to keep track of it all. I think bigger ticket items, I'm not dropping new news here. They're more considered. I think that people tend to be more patient. I think that actually there's two ways to consider that even. I think an electronics category, for example, will probably have a different consideration than the luxury environment where you are less likely to experience a promotional opportunity to buy something on a discount, where you might look for that Black Friday sale on the new TV. You may or may not see that Black Friday sale on a $3,000 handbag because they just don't go on sale. And so those purchases might be made sooner due to the scarcity, right? And oh no, I don't want it to go out of stock because they don't make 7 million of them, they make 500. Where the TV, you might see actually a longer path to pulling the trigger because they're waiting for the right promotion. They're making sure that they're going to get that gift with purchase or what have you. So I think it depends on the category that you're in to or you're in that will determine kind of how this longer consideration process will shake out.
Yeah, no, there's we should probably keep going. There are a lot more questions, and so we'll try to get to as many of those. And John, we'll send these to you afterwards, just in case we don't get through them all. And some of them are actually quite good and quite complex. So thank you everyone for being so engaged. You know, as we look at this idea around kind of online versus offline, and as mentioned before, right, we are seeing this kind of, you know, significant year-on-year increase, and that's versus 2019 in terms of in-store traffic. How, you know, when you think about this data, how does this kind of correlate to what you believe to be kind of the case and what you think is actually the case? Because I think this is where we start to see some real differences versus what people may think to be true and what's actually true.
Are you specifically talking about when it comes to buying online versus buying in the store?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not entirely surprised, right, that we see continued growth here. I think that the research phase that had been so well sort of established online is leading to more simple ways to buy. Access to, like we talked about earlier, different types of, you know, payment types, and, you know, mobile really kind of unlocking as a purchase environment where historically, and I mean kind of at the dawn of it, it wasn't all that of an easy place to buy as compared to desktop. And I think that's actually flip-flopped now to some extent. And so all of those, I think, lead up to digital being the sort of preferred channel, certainly for research. And when it comes to making that final decision, I'm not surprised to see that we're going to see that budget continue to shift online. I think that whole statement is absent the idea that there are certain categories I think will always outperform in store. And you know who you are.
I think, you know, and it's, I mean, the one thing that I do feel, you know, if we just, as we take a step back, right, because the challenges with, you know, greater online sales leads to greater returns. I mean, you know, if you start to think about, in some ways, this idea that, you know, if you're purchasing gift card, right, and then the consumer is taking time after the holiday season, the gift recipient, to then maybe do some research, whether they're going in, you know, kind of online or offline, there is a sustainability factor around that, which I think is quite interesting. And so that I do feel also is, you know, in some of our discussions, is coming into play more and more as well as another way to think about, you know, a more sustainable holiday season, right? Because if all of the purchasing, right, has to be done in, you know, what was 1 month, then became 2 and is now 3 months, you know, so I think the consumer is basically telling us that they want to have more time. They don't want it to be so rushed and so harried and hurried. And I do feel like there is some of the underlying foundation of that is around sustainability. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
I think there's an incredible amount of waste during holidays, and we see it in almost everything we do, and especially the more fortunate. And when you look at the return volume alone that gets recorded every year, and my comms team would probably not like me just to guess what it is, but I remember reading very, very large numbers that had B's behind them of merchandise that comes back, and who knows what happens to it, right? In a lot of cases, it has to get thrown out, and you know. So I think that the essence of the flexibility built into gift card makes that more interesting for people that have a conscience around, you know, do I really want to put this under the tree and it be something that ends up in a landfill? My mom does not subscribe to that, right? I get all kinds of stuff every year from her that I'm like, where did this even come from, or how can I possibly even use this? But I'm sure there's other people that are more aware of what they're doing, and how that kind of ladders up into just, you know, the excess that the U.S. has really kind of landed on a lifestyle choice. And so you're right. I think as we start to see this filter in, you know, sustainability in general, and I'm very broadly talking about it, because we could probably laser down into a bunch of different areas of it. I think the overall tone is changing a little bit. People are being more mindful. We're seeing it in packaging. We're seeing it in the impact of returns and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's going to continue to kind of move up the list, but it's going to do that in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I think this is just kind of another way to kind of, slice and dice. But, what we're seeing is this, that number of 87% is just phenomenal in terms of how people are looking at their budgets and where they expect to spend across certain categories. And, the experiences one was also, I thought that was fascinating that it was that high on the list. I don't know, what were you surprised with here, John?
That one creeping up, because, when you look at year over year, and we've only really started tracking it, a couple of years ago, but, I think that is fascinating. It goes to show you that, it's not always about things, and people are valuing experiences, moments, more than they have in the past. And it does make a great gift. I'm not going to lie. Right. So I think this is really an interesting chance for retail, though, to extend outside of the four walls of their catalog and start to think about what are the adjacencies, what are the affinities in the experiences that complement their assortment, and can that become part of what they actually bring to their shoppers? And you don't have to do it yourself, right? There's lots of call them distributors or aggregators of services and experiences that can be brought into the catalog. And so I think a prediction is we're going to start to see that happen more over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think this slide's really interesting because I do think, we've all had a few challenging years with the supply chain, and it is still a top of mind concern for folks. This idea around things arriving later than expected. And, I think we are seeing it as well from data that we have access to. How much do you think this kind of comes into the psyche or the thought process for consumers? Number one, pulling things into October, and then number two, as we kind of even move into December, do you think that those who have maybe kind of waited a little bit longer than they wish they had, are they then turning to kind of alternative, types of gifts as a result?
So yes, I do think that there's a fork in the road at some point where you start to say, I'm not sure I'm still not sure. I'm getting really close. Let me just go to our favorite restaurant and get a gift card, because then we can enjoy a meal together and we can make that, kind of the gift. And it's a real gift, actually, right? And we've all kind of valued that more after what we went through with lockdown and isolation. Surprising a little bit on this list for me is number two, inability to determine products touch and feel. And I feel like retail in general has done a great job of making it simple to get it wrong in terms of the return path and process, and that this hesitation or objection to buying was really kind of going away to some extent. And of course, the categories that are easier to buy than the ones that you really feel like you need to touch and feel should have higher velocity. But I'm surprised personally to kind of see that even in the top three or four. The arriving later than expected, I think, is part of what drives the earlier, shopping season that we're seeing and experiencing this year, especially after the crisis that we were under last year. And so, I remember when holiday shopping started at 4 a.m, going to the doorbusters, that was like when the gun went off, right at the beginning of the race. And
I have PTSD, oh my gosh, there were times, John, right, where, it's first it was like, it used to be 6 a.m., then it was 5 a.m., then it was 4. I think I still remember doing some at 3. Then it moved into Thanksgiving Day, right? I mean, if you think about kind of where we were and how crazy it got, and to the point that some retailers, there are people literally suffering physical harm on Black Friday, because I mean, it is
America at its best.
yeah, but it goes back to, actually, it's interesting. If you think about your point earlier, right, where we're looking at like price, it really, like the discounts and the deals, right? That is just a great reminder about, if it's a, and it goes back to, I think too, it's like limited time, there's a limited quantity, and right, like scarcity. Yeah. I mean,
it's all the dimensions, right? And it's, yes, I think what it proves is that when you give something away, people will come and get it, right? But what is 10% on a $100 item? It's $10. That's like a really expensive large cup of coffee at Starbucks anymore. So like, right? I mean, let's be honest. Maybe with a cake pop.
Which is why I'm like brewing my own. Yes.
Yeah. So, I think the discounting strategy in general it's not good enough anymore for it just to be a price slash of some kind. Like there has to be the scarcity, like you said, as part of it. There has to be maybe more value add to that discount as part of it to really move the needle. Unless you want to give it away, and that's what used to happen really on Black Friday, which from our measures, there are more people buying for themselves than they're buying for others on a Black Friday.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I do think that it goes back to this like experimentation element. I get the feeling that the retailers want to do their best in terms of like holding price because of the inventory situation that we're in, and that is why this October we are seeing a lot of really interesting experiments. What works, what doesn't, what gets the consumer across the finish line. We're, instead of like price meet, we're hearing about price beat, and it's just and I gotta tell you, for the consumer, it's just like there's so much that's changing so rapidly. It's fascinating. So I think we have one more slide to kind of conclude with, and
by the way, just to kind of top off your last comment, I think that we're going to see a little paralysis at some point, where the game of, is that the best deal, that could drag weeks out on a single purchase decision. And so there is an interesting side effect potentially of playing kind of promotional wars out there, and ultimately getting people to the place where they just don't even make the decision, because they're like, I don't want to buy it and then find out that I could have bought it cheaper. And if it's that important to them, all of this noise we're seeing around it, I'm just curious how that's going to affect the speed to hit the buy button and finally make the decision.
I mean, it's interesting. Like I always call it like the chump factor. I won't name any particular retailers, but I remember being in a large department store and the person in front of me had like a stack of coupons, and like I didn't, and I was like, and then I'm like, then you're like very aggressively looking on your phone to see if you can find like a digital coupon or whatnot, so that you're not like the biggest chump in the store. So I do think that is, and that's why I do think this idea around, right, we've talked to many, being physically in store with retailers and talking to retailers, this idea that they are guaranteeing this kind of, we'll not just meet the price, but we'll beat it. And also, right, the fact that so many store managers and even like, store associates, team members have more and more, they're more and more empowered. Yeah. And that, I think, there's so many reasons I think that's important. But I think that, for them to get a lot of satisfaction out of their job, that they can actually impact, right, the kind of conversion of a consumer, that they can have an impact. I think and right now we have so much of this is technology driven. Right now we have so much of the technology like in store to kind of take care of that. So this I thought was actually a very interesting kind of way to conclude, because we've talked about, right, this holiday season, and now we're talking about how does the consumer actually, for the most part, want to receive a digital, right, either a digital or physical gift card. And I thought that, it was actually quite nice, right? This opportunity to acknowledge, first of all, then they don't have to, if they can do it in like an app or something, then they don't have to like send a separate thank you. So maybe there's an efficiency aspect here. But there's also I'm so thankful, I'm so grateful, right? I want to be able to kind of communicate that to somebody, and then everyone wins, right? The gift giver feels great, the gift recipient feels great. Where did you think? I always thought customized packaging was, at least as the kind of the person who is giving the gift, right? The ability to kind of have like a cool, like, you know, either virtual or physical kind of package around it. But maybe as we're thinking about physical packaging and going back to sustainability, maybe that is kind of lower on the list. And maybe there it goes back to it's, you know, when you're wrapping it in kind of a digital environment, the consumer cares about different things. What is your take on all this? It's a lot to digest.
Yeah, no, I think the first point to make is that the digital gift is delivered when the recipient opens the digital experience. And that's actually kind of a fundamental break in how our system works today, which is that the product has to land in the driveway for the gift to be delivered. That's actually not true. This is a person-to-person engagement with a gift, an item in the middle. And so the engagement happening is the gift, actually. And so, so you get to serve that through a digital channel and build into that flexibility. And so I think that's why you see things like, you know, ability for the recipient to choose, you know, where they want it shipped. Do I want it in my office or do I want it at home? As an example, that makes a big difference in corporate gifting too, as well. The ability for people to make decisions around an item that you may have failed at making for them before the item gets picked, packed, and delivered. It's pretty important, right? Like I'm familiar with my size. I know my color preference. People that know me know my color preference generally, but to be able to actually make those selections myself is a pretty empowering concept on the recipient side. Today, that looks like you send me the wrong thing. I got to make time in my schedule to send it back. By the way, if I do that, you probably get your money back on your credit card when it happens. And now I got to, you know, forego the gift or have the awkward conversation about, you got it wrong. Can you buy me the black one? You know, like that's just not how this whole cycle works. So it really makes a lot of sense for this to be that power, that decision power to be shifted to the person actually getting the gift. And the closed loop, you'd be surprised, the thank you notes. You know, everyone will say, you don't sell more stuff because you offer a thank you note capability. But by having that, and that being associated with your brand, now the halo effect of the warm feeling you get when someone says thank you is under the banner of fill in the blank, you know, retailer. And that's a feel good moment that you have association with now. And so we see a lot of participation on that with both product gifting and digital gift cards. It's like 85%, which sadly means 15% don't say anything. But we can think of the positive, which is that the lion's share actually do. And again, that speaks more to gifting is not just commerce. It's a consumer to consumer engagement. And so these little details really matter. You know, a lot of people upload their personal videos that play as part of the opening of the gift experience. That's really kind of new, right? We never really had that chance to do something like that when you were buying your cousins and aunts things in Florida, and I lived in New York and I knew I wasn't going to see them. Now I get a chance to really connect versus, you know, a corrugated box showing up on their front step at some point and then figuring out like, who sent this to me? I'm not sure, you know? Like that's really lame when you're talking about a gift. At that point, you've really transactionalized that engagement. And so we get to do that in the digital environment. And I think that it will continue to drive the adoption because of the experience and then the closed loop side of the thank yous.
Well, with that, I do want to apologize to Royce, Scott, and Richard for not getting to your questions. We will get those answered. And, you know, John, I want to thank you because you always push us to think about things in a different way. And, you know, we're really seeing some fairly dramatic changes in how consumers are shopping, what they're shopping for, and how they're building out this community and, you know, how retailers are thinking about loyalty. And I feel like, you know, as much as we've looked at gift card accounting over the years and breakage and all these, right? I mean, you know, being in the real weeds, like it's just the conversation has evolved into a, you know, right there's a sustainability component. There is this kind of rewarding your employees. I mean, it's become so much bigger. as you talk about this idea of stored value, I think that we're, this kind of like pace, this acceleration of change is getting faster. And I want to thank you for, helping us think differently and really pushing us. And I want to wish you a phenomenal holiday season, because we're already technically, I guess, almost a month into it. And
why are you so late?
I know. I know. Now I have like anxiety. I have to say, I was like, I haven't really started.
Where have you been?
I know. I'm like,
no, it's a fun topic, and it's a huge topic. It's you guys have studied and outputted that over $800 billion in gifting by 2025. There's few categories that are as big, and so what's different is it's really hard to spot, and it's really hard to think about where you fit in that overall market. And so there is generally no head merchant for gifting, but yet it's such a massive amount of demand out there. So I think we'll see some shifting in that as well over the next couple of years, where people start to focus a little bit, not just in holiday, but evergreen. Birthdays is bigger than Christmas. Don't forget.
And I will say, there are different websites, right? Like every day is some kind of holiday. So you can literally write 360, every day.
True story.
So it's really interesting. And I think just going back to this idea of, right, how we take care of, our employees, our loved ones, ourselves, right? This kind of, there are these additional occasions, and I think we're looking at those in a different way. So thanks, John. Sure. Happy holidays to everybody.
Yeah, and, you too.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon. See you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers.